Good evening. We're going to call this meeting to order, and I've asked Mr. Jones to give the invocation, so if you'll stand with me and he, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Will you bow your heads with me? Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the rain. Thank you for all the many gifts you provide for us in the city of Homewood. We pray for all of our department heads. We thank you for all of the work that's been done to put the budget together. And we pray for good deliberations as we look to do wonderful things here in the city. We pray for all of Homewood's residents and the blessings that they bestow on the city as well. We ask all this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, very much.
You're welcome.
Roll call.
Yes, sir. Mr. Gwaltney?
Here.
Mr. Thames?
Here.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Here.
Mr. Wolverton?
Here.
Mr. McCluskey? Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Smith? Here. Mr. Wyatt?
Here.
Mrs. Andress?
Here.
Mr. Wright?
Here.
And President Limbaugh.
Here.
So you got one out. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Next item is reading of the minutes from the August 12th, 2019 meeting. The chair would welcome a motion for dispensing of the reading and approving said minutes. Okay. Motion by Mr. Thames, second by Mr. Wolverton. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes. Board vacancies, we had several openings that weren't responded to, so therefore we're going to extend these or reopen these. The Hydra the two at large, and Ms. Smith, we're going to ask you to do something for us on that, but we'll tell you about that later, okay?
Okay.
And we're going to extend those to September the 23rd at 6 p.m. The Historic Preservation at Large, Mayor, that's your appointment. We understand that.
Yes, sir. We have 3 applicants, and I will get, I believe that closed either yesterday or today.
It closed today.
Today. So I will interview all 3 applicants and have a recommendation for you at the next council meeting.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that.
And
Yes.
President Limbaugh, can we back up on the Hydra? Can we just say instead of it closing at 6, that it closes at 4:30? That's what we normally do.
Okay, 4:30 is fine. Thank you for straightening me out on that. The Arts Advisory Ward 2 closed today. Did we have any applicants for that?
No, sir. And she asked to reopen.
Okay, so therefore, we will reopen that to September the 23rd and encourage y'all to see what you can do for us. Cable Commission Ward 3 closed today also. Mr. Jones?
What are the applicants, who are the applicants for?
I didn't get any applicants.
Okay.
So
We
we'll
need
open
to,
that through September 23rd.
that would be great. I'll get to work on that.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. All right. Thank you. Is there anything else in terms of boards we need to discuss? I'm going to assume not. All right. For the agenda, we have 2 items to add, both to committee referral. One is 310819, which will be to finance, which is to request funding for the landscaping contract requested by Mr. Gwaltney and Mr. Thames. And again, that goes to finance. The other item is planning and development. It's 240519, which is request to review and amend the West Homewood District zoning. I think it specifies Article 4, Section EE. And this is requested by Mr. Higginbotham and Mr. Wolverton. So those 2 items are the only 2 items to the agenda. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for approval.
Second.
All right, motion by Mr. Gwaltney, second by Mr. Mr. Wolverton. Very good, thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved unanimously. We'll move to the consent agenda. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for approval. All right, motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Higginbotham. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. All right, we'll move to old business agenda, 120619, request to consider agreement between the City of Homewood and Sanford University, requested by Counselor Alex Wyatt. Report from P&D, please. Who
Yes,
has-
sir. We discussed this, I believe, twice in P&D, and there was also a public meeting, I believe, at the library. There was public comment taken. We heard from representatives from Sanford as well as the council, and after several amendments were made to the original proposed agreement, the motion was voted on and sent to the council for full approval, 4-0.
All right, so we have a motion by P&D. Is there any further discussion with any council members? Mr. Jones?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. I just wanted to make a comment and to thank the Planning and Development Committee for working through this, and want to thank Mr. Wyatt for all of his work on it. I know this was a tough assignment to kind of work through. Thank you for Sanford for being flexible on some of the things. I'm not for everything, but I feel like it's the best that we could put together with our negotiations. So that was all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have anything else to say? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, so Resolution 19-126 passes unanimously, and I also would like to personally verbalize that I appreciate everyone having the flexibility they had to consider everything. And I think Alex White did an absolute yeoman's job on this. And each of us, yes, I agree. Jennifer, we can
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Okay, next item. 180719, public hearing set for tonight for consideration to rezone property at 3021 Firefighter Lane from an R5, which is attached dwelling unit district, to an R4, which is attached dwelling unit district. Applicant Jason Hale for Willow Homes to permit the development of one new residential house and one existing house renovation comprising of two lots currently within one parcel. Detached dwelling units allowed in R4. By the way, the Planning Commission had a unanimous vote of 8-0 for a favorable recommendation. And with that, requested by White Pugh and our P&D committee. And with that, a report from P&D. Mr. Thames?
Yes, sir. As you said, the request is for an R4 rezone. This would allow detached residential units at the Planning Commission level. It was a 8-0 favorable recommendation, along with several proffers by the applicant that included to adhere to all NPD building regulations. And so the committee heard these details and voted 4-0 to send to council without recommendation pending the public hearing.
Thank you, sir. All right, we're going to open the public hearing, and is there anyone who would like to speak to this matter? Mr. Cobb? And by the way, anyone who's here to speak to the matter, please sign in with Ms. Salter.
This is Jason Hale, applicant,
Okay.
and what Mr. Thames told you is absolutely correct, the way it went through the Planning Commission, and I really didn't have anything to add to that. I just came here in case you wanted to ask me any questions along with Mr. Hale.
While he's coming up to ask the question,
Sure.
the recommendation from the planning commission that I got didn't have NPD language in there, so I need to add that. Could you help me understand that?
Sure, that was the applicant proffered at the Planning Commission to meet the NPD building standards, setbacks, height, things like that.
Okay.
Setbacks, side and front, height, and then the lot coverage requirements of no more than 50%.
So you'll meet all NPD requirements.
Those are the ones I agreed to. If there's something I'm not thinking of, that's what we discussed with the side and the 50%
And the
lot
height.
coverage and the height.
Can you help me with this?
I'll get that from Donna, but I do remember he did talk about the height. That was a question. We're making it just like an NPD, but the zoning is a R4 more compatible.
Yeah, this is the height, side and front setbacks, and the total lot development were those specifically mentioned at Planning Commission.
Mr. President. Mr. President, I was going to speak.
Ms. Andrews, go.
We, as you know, we've had a very vocal group of residents on Lancaster and Huntington, very passionate about their neighborhood, and really want to tell you how much I appreciate the work that you've done to, just right out of the gate, doing what was right by the neighborhood, and everything that I've heard has been positive and supportive, and I would have heard otherwise, believe me, and I'm very appreciative that this could have been handled, so quickly, and you've managed to handle it very quickly instead of spreading it out over a year. So we thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, anyone else?
I think there were some pictures up there. Can we see the pictures again, Brian? No.
Okay, is this the
That's one
new
of the
build?
proposed, sketches for a house that would sit on the lot.
So again, for my simplicity, that's the new build, correct?
New build, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea how the renovated one will look? or-
No, we honestly haven't done much work on it because we were, kind of waiting for this process to play out before we evaluate it. Look a
I
little more
understand.
in detail.
So
Right.
the existing house that's on the lot now is just going to be renovated in place, and then the other house will be built adjacent to it?
That was our original plan.
Yeah.
I didn't proffer to that because we don't really know much about that house, to be
Right.
honest with you, but that was our original plan.
Okay, good. Anything else? Ladies, gentlemen? All right, thank you, appreciate
All
it.
right, Thank you.
No.
I think he's waiting to see once they get into the house, because they haven't really done any work on it. That's what it sounded like to me.
Yeah, because I really don't know the structure, the integrity of it right now, so.
And I get that. I'm not trying to be argumentative. I get that you've got to do a thorough inspection, inside and out, get under it and all that good stuff.
But I'm guessing if, and you, I don't want to speak for you, but I assume if y'all went in and started doing the inspection and realized maybe the foundation is bad, that you would not, but you would build a similar style
Right.
house to the one that is going to be the new build.
Yes, if you've seen our work, we do our best to fit in, and that's why we proffered to the setbacks and the height restrictions, so that even if we did have to go the route of a new home, there was some guarantee that it would, would fit within what's in the neighboring community, so.
It's not my ward, so I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that people
My
that
ward
are
is-
more affected, they're okay even if,
My ward is happy.
even if the current house comes down and something else goes
Yeah.
in. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this matter? If there is not, then we will close this public hearing. Any other comments from the council? If not, Mr. Kendrick.
Yes, it's an ordinance to amend ordinance 1602, City of Homewood entitled zoning ordinance and zoning map of the city, herefore adopted by the city council. Whereas the planning commission has approved and recommended to the city council that ordinance 1602, the zoning ordinance be amended to provide for the rezoning of the property listed herein from its current zoning classification R5 attached dwelling unit district to City of Homewood R4 attached dwelling unit district zoning districts. Whereas the city council has found and determined to be desirable to set a public hearing on August 26, 2019. Now therefore be it resolved by the city council that public meeting as follows, that the parcel of property described below, lots 10 and 11 of block 12 of the Stacy Land Survey is hereby rezoned from its current zoning classification R5 to the R4 zoning classification, subject to the proper comply with NPD requirements as set out tonight. And two, that from and after the enactment of this ordinance, that the provisions related to R4 subject to the propers of ordinance 1602 shall govern and control the uses made and permitted on the property described in section 1, Section 3, is August 26th at 6 o'clock p.m. is the time and place for the public hearing, at which time all persons have an opportunity to speak in for or opposed to such order. Section 4, the ordinance is given, the city clerk is given notice of the ordinance as required by law. In Section 5, any part of the provision of the ordinance declared to be unconstitutional or involved by a court of common jurisdiction, all parts of the ordinance remain not affected thereby. In Section 6, the ordinance shall become effective immediately once passed by the city council, approval by the mayor, as otherwise becoming law.
Thank you, Mr. Kendrick. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for unanimous consent.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Ms. Smith, second from Ms. Andrus. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gwaltney?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Thames?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
Mr. Wolverton?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andress?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
And Mr. Limbaugh?
Yes. So this will be ordinance 2756, and Chair would welcome a motion and a second for approval.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion from Mr. Wright, second from Mrs. Andrus. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gwaltney?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Thames?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
Mr. Wolverton?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andress?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
And Mr. Limbaugh?
Yes. So that 2756 is passed unanimously. Thank you, and we will move on to 090819, public hearing set for tonight for a variance to the Homewood fence ordinance to allow a front yard fence at 1604 Roseland Drive, requested by Lee Hammonds, Wyatt Pugh, Greg Cobb, with our BEZ. Report from Special Issues, Ms. Smith.
Yes, the committee met last week and heard from the Hammonds about their desire to put a fence in for the benefit of their son, who was recently diagnosed with autism. The committee met and voted 5-0 to refer the item back out to the full council without recommendation pending the public hearing tonight. Motion made by Mr. Higginbotham and seconded by Ms. Andrus.
All right, thank you, ma'am. We will open the public hearing, and I would ask anyone that's going to speak to be sure and sign in. Mr. Cobb?
I'm just here for questions, sir. If anybody has any questions of me. Our
Do we have any
applicant's here.
pictures?
Can Brian?
Brian, yes, Brian has got the pictures.
I had a question.
Sure, Mr. Jones.
Brian, can you show the larger drawing?
I have some hard copies.
Oh, there.
Good.
Yes.
My,
If we can begin with a question by Mr. Jones before we
Yeah,
make a comment. sir.
during the committee meeting, we were asking if there were going to be a couple of options. Are there a couple of options for us to consider, or is it just one?
It's just one which we consider to be, I guess, our lesser ideal. So just for your consideration, we, if we could, we'd go pretty much all the way to the sidewalk to the end of our property. What we're presenting here is really pulled back about 10 feet off of the sidewalk.
Okay.
It shows that dimension in the other view.
There's two.
Well, show us the other, okay. Now zero in on that, and
I thought it was.
if you can, and by the way, this is Mr. Hammond, if you can,
Right there, it says 10 feet from the back of the sidewalk.
where's your laser?
Where's the walkway?
So Roseland is going to be below the
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
So the walkway is that rectangle. I can't quite reach it, but there at the bottom, you see sod, right above sod is the walkway. Yeah, and if you want to.
Could you
pass
zoom
those
out
out?
a little bit, Brian? Make it a little bit less close up so we can kind of get a bigger, yeah, there you go.
That's all right.
So see,
There's
that's
10
the
of us.
walkway right down the middle.
One
There's
per
the gate,
ward.
I think, right where it is. Center.
Mr. Jones and I'll share.
Oh, here we go.
That is large. Yeah.
All right, who's got any further questions for Mr. Hammond, Mrs. Andrus?
Can you walk us through the greenery that you've got surrounding the fence line?
They just took my copy, but essentially it's you got boxwoods on either side of the walkway that comes out from the property, and then you got climbing roses down the remainder.
know y'all had discussed, this probably doesn't have anything to do with this particular design, but you had mentioned possibly the open terrace that's at the front of the house, that y'all might consider closing that in as well. Is that still a possibility, maybe?
Right on the,
That's
you're
fine.
looking at our house on the front right, it's an open patio area, so we talked about fence, or screening that in.
And I have a question. What kind of backyard do you have? How large is your backyard?
I don't know the exact dimensions. I'd say
Is-
30 to 40 feet in depth, 30 to 35 feet in width. Our carport goes into the back and cuts into some of the fenced-in part.
Is it fenced in? Okay, and so we can all understand, but that does not really give you a suitable open-air area for your son?
I mean, it allows for him to play back there, but, and I don't know that I made this point well last week. You know, in addition to the safety, some of it's just around quality of life and trying to create an inclusive environment for him. So while it's primarily safety driven, we also want to allow him to enjoy all that Roseland Drive really has to offer, to be able to engage with neighbors, with others that are passing by, just to really help in his development. Yeah.
All right, any other council members, any questions for Mr. Hammonds? Thank you, sir, we appreciate it. All right, who else would like to?
Is there anything?
I was just going to mention, I do have letters of support from our neighbors. I think that was asked at the last meeting, and his pediatrician as well.
All right, we'd like to give those to Ms. Salter.
Yes.
Yes, that would be good to have those
Do you need me
on
to
record.
do you need them back?
Just for numerical knowledge, how many letters are there?
3 in total.
Okay.
And I will say, also, someone who is not a neighbor, but who is a colleague of Mr. Hammond's, sent an email to us, so that I can forward that to Ms.
I remember, we all got it.
Salter as well,
yes.
yeah, from Mitch.
Mr. White?
I'll let Mr. Hammonds finish what he's doing.
Sorry.
One additional question. At the committee meeting, there was some talk of possible proffers. Are y'all making any proffers with this?
I'm not familiar with that term.
Like if you were willing to,
Yes, I mean, it's really for us, right? So I think it's really for the duration of our, residence there. So we're not doing it for permanency, other than we hope to live there forever, but it'd be just for us.
So by that, do you mean that if you move, that you're willing to take it up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So I can ask one question, is the 10 foot on there 10 foot from the property line or 10 foot from the sidewalk?
I interpreted those as one and the same on the survey. It's
Okay,
10
well, if
feet
you got a
from the-
survey,
it's
okay.
10 feet from the sidewalk.
Okay. It varies all over town, so
I didn't know that till the landscape architect told me. But,
Thank you.
How far is it from the side, from the property line on the side, I guess?
I don't know if it's on the.
it looks like it runs down,
2 feet.
Yes, 2 feet.
On one side.
on the west side, it's,
Would that require additional variance for side setback?
not for a fence. No, sir.
The resolution would say, stipulate the variance would be good as long as the child lives in the home. Everybody comfortable with that?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
If it were passed, yes. All right, thank you. Who else would like to speak to this matter? All right, I'm going to assume the answer to that is no one, so we will. Well, we can close the public hearing and still have comments. Hold on. Close the public hearing. Mr. Jones?
One thing that's mentioned is, and this is why we, I think, struggle with this particular issue, because the point of the reason that we have the ordinance in place is so that you can congregate and you can get to know your neighbors. And when you have a fence, you're really not able to do that. You're not able to visit with your neighbors, and that's one of the reasons that we have that. I think the fence is too large, personally, but and I'm struggling with deciding to approve this, because it just opens up a lot for the city. So those are my thoughts and for the record.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to speak?
I will say.
Ms. Andrus?
This is my opinion. I think it looks nice. I think, I appreciate the greenery. I think it's not all the way pulled up to the sidewalk. I support it. Just my comments for the record.
All right. Anyone else?
I would just like to say, I'm like Walter, I'm struggling a bit just because my fear in almost all of these cases is the precedent that it sets coming forward. But I will say, this is probably in the last year, the third type of variance we've had requested for this specific reason for a child that has special needs. And it might be something that we need to kind of think about, because it may be that because it's more prevalent now that this is something that we're going to be seeing more of. Again, I'm struggling a little bit with the size of the fence, but I do completely understand the Hammonds' desire and need to protect the safety of their son. So I just think maybe that the whole issue might be something that we need to address,
I don't disagree. Right.
One last.
Yeah.
Sure.
That is, we're dealing within Ward 3, a situation where a fence was allowed for that particular resident, and that resident has left 3 years ago, and we have not yet taken care of the fence.
Oh, actually, it came down like yesterday. I saw them. They were out there taking it up.
Well,
Not kidding. Just
wow,
I
so,
apologize.
okay. I didn't even, wow, okay, okay, so it only took 3 years. So I hope we do a better job in this
Of
situation.
policing, yes.
Of completing and abiding by what we do here. Okay.
Can I follow up on
Mr.
that point? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Mr. Gwaltney first, and then you, Mr. Wright.
Sorry, Councilor Ray.
You were first.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of highlight the same thing. Is I have a little bit of a heartburn about how far it is off the sidewalk. I guess I was under the impression from the committee meeting that it would be a little bit further set back as one of the options, like closer to the sidewalk. And I got the impression too that the other variances that we've passed for this situation have been closer to that entry point or that sidewalk in the yard. So it would be back maybe instead of 10 feet, 20 feet or 25 feet. Because it meets that need for safety dropping off, getting out of the car, but kind of meets our desire for not setting a precedent of a fence being all the way up at the sidewalk.
Good point. Mr. Wright?
Yeah, to follow up Walter's point, because I know we've done this before, how do we, and this really has nothing to do with this case, but how do we enforce getting, the variance is expired, I understand we're going to have that in the provision, and
then Mr. Cook will write them a letter to Hamlin, sorry.
yeah, so it just gets got it.
I mean, is there a fine or anything that gets levied at any point?
No, it ends up being a fence that's standing in violation of an ordinance.
An ordinance, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's possible.
All right, I mean, I know it'll be taken care of in this case and all that. I don't mean that, but just in general, how we do that. But thank you.
All right, let me then, I think we're all through. So therefore, let me then propose that anyone who wants to make the motion with any sort of codicil or modification, go for it. I mean, part of what I'm saying is the motion would require the fence to come down when the child no longer lives at the.
In addition to that, like.
Yeah, is there something other? That's exactly right. Is there any? I'm ready.
Can we do that? The
We
applicant
can.
wouldn't have to
Sure we
proffer
can.
those?
Can't we do that, Mr. Kendrick?
Okay. Very good.
Thank you. After 7 years, I think I figured that.
Shut up, and I apologize. I guess then, and that has been the case in previous situations, the variance has been granted to allow for safety from the front door, usually to a vehicle. So given that, I would move to approve with the proffer that the variance only lasts as long as the child is at the home, and with the fence pulled back to the, I don't know how I would say this, yep, I guess the walkway to the driveway. Does that make sense?
Show the picture, Brian, please.
Yeah.
So what Mr. Thames, yeah, I know, but
Is that like that?
Yes, sir.
Does anybody else have an extra copy of this?
Here's the physical version.
Get a small one?
No.
Sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
That's, I only know the one small.
You want to draw one?
Yep. I like what you drew.
So can you explain it a little further, Mr. Thames, with the picture up there?
Does the walkway already exist? Here's a walkway. But that looks like new landscaped walkway, different from what was currently there.
I didn't mean to get in the weeds, but I thought we could have something we could agree on here.
I'm thinking that walkway is new.
Yes, that looks new.
Is that correct?
Y'all
Hammonds?
have one existing, but it's closer to the house, is that right?
Correct. Well, I mean, I don't know, but that is not in existence today.
Okay.
Okay, so that's proposed.
Correct.
Okay, good. Well, but it's not going to happen. A measurement would be desirable. Mr. Gwaltney, where is your wife when we need her?
We can find a ruler, there's a scale.
Can't hurt.
And it's not, the lot line is not parallel to the street. So it is parallel to the street, the street's not straight.
It's not straight. That's, yeah.
I have no one to blame but myself. That's what I said.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
Mr.
Okay.
Thames.
22 feet from the eastern edge of the sidewalk. So that's diagonally closer to the house.
Feet from the house.
I'm sorry.
Wait a minute.
I'm not an architect.
I think this end of the dais would like to ask for, if I can make a motion for as proposed, and then what would happen if that did not pass? Would that
Yeah,
kill
that
it
would kill
total
it.
and send it back, or?
Yeah,
Okay,
it would kill it.
okay,
Sorry.
okay.
It appears to be 22 feet from the front of the, what's indicated as the covered porch of the house.
Okay, good.
So essentially equidistant between the front of the house and the sidewalk.
Yes. Good, Ms. Smith. Thank you very much. All right, so we have,
The road is in there.
Yeah, the road, it's Roseland that's actually kind of.
But the sidewalk is also on the drawing.
Yes, because
Yes, right, because it follows the road, yeah.
So it'd be a different distance, the way Mr. Hazard drew it. He drew it straight across.
Right, you could, I don't know what his motion's going to be, but it could be straight across or.
all right, one more time your motion, Mr. Thames.
All right. My motion would be to approve with the proffer that the variance only exists as long as the child is living in the house, and that the fence is 22 feet from the front of the home on both the eastern and western side. It appears the house comes out to the same distance on either side.
But no more than 20 feet from the
Yes, sir.
All right, so we have a motion from Mr. Thames. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Gwaltney. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
All right, call roll, please, ma'am.
Mr. Gwaltney?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Thames?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
Mr. Wolverton? Mr. McCluskey? Sorry, Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andress?
No.
Mr. Wright,
No.
and President Limbaugh.
Yes. So the vote carries 8-2.
Yes, sir.
And that is resolution number 19-127, and that passes. Thank you. All right, next item, 010819, request for consideration to release property lien of $7,500 for property located at 2531 18th Place South, Mamie L. Foster's, Homewood, Alabama. And report from Finance, Mr. Jones.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. The Finance Committee met on August 19th, voted 5-0 to recommend approval of this item.
All right, so we have a motion from Finance. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is Resolution 19-128, and it is passed and approved. 020819, request for consideration of budget amendments for fiscal year 18-19 budgets, requested by Berkeley Squires and Robert Burgett. Report from Finance, Mr. Jones.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. After much deliberation, the Finance Committee met, voted 5-0 to recommend approval of this item.
All right, we have a motion from Finance. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Is there any opposed? Okay. That is Resolution 19-129, and it is approved unanimously. 030819, request to set a bid opening date for a record service contract, requested by Chief Ross. Let's see, do we need a report from Finance when this bid date is being set in September?
Well, it's just mainly a report that we recommended the bid opening date for September 16th at 4:45. It's mainly a report.
Sure, good. So we will set the bid opening date for September 16th, 2019 at 4:45 p.m. with a deadline for submission set for 4:30. All right, next item, 040819, request to set a bid opening date for animal control contract, again requested by Chief Ross. Report from Finance, Mr. Jones.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. The same recommendation from Finance recommending a bid opening date of September 16th at 4:45 with a deadline for 4:30 for submissions.
All right, good. So we will set that bid opening date for September 16, 2019 at 4:45 p.m. with a deadline of submission at 4:30 p.m. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
050819, request for consideration to authorize the mayor to sign a renewal contract for the lease with the Barber Companies for the West Precinct, requested by Chief Rawls. Report from Finance, Mr. Jones.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. The committee met and voted 5-0 to recommend approval of renewing this contract.
All right, great. We have a motion from Finance.
Quick question.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I missed that meeting, but how long is the contract?
3 years.
3 years.
3
Okay.
years, yeah.
All right, and with that, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is Resolution 19-130, and that is approved unanimously. 070819, request for consideration to repeal ordinance number 2333, and that's an ordinance prohibiting a left turn in an easterly direction onto Valley Avenue Drive from Valley Avenue, requested by Randy Hambley. Report from Public Safety. Who's reporting out?
I am.
Mr. White.
The committee met and voted 5-0 to recommend approval of repealing the ordinance. The motion was made by Mr. Thames and seconded by Mr. Wolverton.
All right, so we have a motion from Public Safety. First reading, Mr. Kendrick.
Yes, sir. City Council has previously adopted ordinance 2333 on August 27, 2007. The ordinance, whereas the City Council determined public interest to repeal the ordinance. Now therefore be ordained by the City Council as follows. Since Council does adopt this ordinance, repeal ordinance number 2333, previously adopted by the City Council on August 27, 2007. To this ordinance become effective upon adoption by the City Council, approved by the Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Kendrick. Motion for unanimous consent and a second requested.
So moved.
Motion from Mr. Jones, second from
Second.
Mrs. Andrus. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gwaltney? Mr. Thames?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Higginbotham? Yes. Mr. Wolverton?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andress?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
And Mr. Limbaugh.
Yes. So this will be ordinance 2757. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for approval.
Second.
I'm sorry, I had my back turned. Motion by Mr. Higginbotham, second by Mr. Wolverton. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gwaltney?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Thames? Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
Mr. Wolverton?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andress?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
And Mr. Limbaugh.
Yes, so 2757 is passed unanimously. Next item is 160819, request for consideration to authorize the mayor to sign a liability waiver with Altel Robotics for a UAV, otherwise known as a drone, a donation requested by Chief Bresnan, Lieutenant Broadhead, and our fire department report from finance. Please, Mr. Jones.
It was actually, was that on you or
It
is
says
No, that-
finance.
It's on special issues.
Oh, it says fire department.
Well, okay.
I'm
it's
sorry,
see.
that was my fault. It's just
Special issues,
I
Ms.
apologize.
Smith.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, that's no problem. I was like, I think it's on my
Yeah.
meetings.
Thank you.
We met and voted 5-0 to recommend approving, motion made by Mr. Higginbotham, seconded by Ms. Andress, 5-0.
Great. So we have a report, we have a motion from Special Issues. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous, and that is Resolution 19131. All right, 190819, request for consideration to reconfigure intersection / convergence of Vulcan Road behind 228 Oxmoor Road, requested by Mr. Wolverton. Report from Public Safety, Mr. White.
Sure.
Excuse me.
And this is a tricky one, too.
Yeah, it is.
All right, the committee met and after hearing from Randy Hambley voted 5-0 to recommend adding a stop sign and removing one from the other side of Vulcan Road. Motion was made by Councilor Wolverton and seconded by Councilor Andrus.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Kendrick, first reading.
Yes, this is an ordinance to further regulate traffic in the city of Homewood all along Vulcan Road Drive. Vulcan Road, excuse me. City council does adopt this ordinance as follows. Every person from the corporation traveling along that one-way portion of Vulcan Drive which exits Oxmoor Boulevard should come to a complete stop intersection of the one-way portion of Vulcan Drive with Vulcan Drive at depicted in Exhibit A. We have a map on this. Section 2, the previously installed stop sign installed all along Vulcan Road in the vicinity of the stop sign authorized in Section 1 above shall be removed. Section 3, the violation of this ordinance shall be punished as provided by Section 1-A of the Code of Ordinances. Section 4, the chief of police shall direct the property director. The stop sign is authorized in paragraphs 1 and 2 above. Section 3, of any part of the provision ordinance traffic in constitutional law is provision in the full portion of traffic. Section 6, the business ordinance shall become effective immediately upon passage by city council or approval of mayor or otherwise.
Thank you, sir. Chair would welcome a motion.
Does it say Vulcan Road everywhere?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Chair would welcome a motion and a second for unanimous consent.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Smith, second by Mr. Wolverton. Roll call.
Mr. Gwaltney?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Thames? Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
Mr. Wolverton?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andress?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
And Mr. Limbaugh.
Yes, so this will be ordinance 2758, and the chair would welcome a motion and a second for approval. Motion by Mr. Wolverton, second by Ms. Smith. Roll call.
2758. Mr. Gwaltney?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Thames? Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
Mr. Wolverton?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andress?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
And Mr. Limbaugh.
Yes, so 2758 is passed unanimously.
Mr. President,
Yes.
can I make one quick comment
Sure.
about this? If we could get Mr. Hamley to maybe look at putting some additional signage that, like changing intersection or dangerous intersection, just something so that the public will know that this is coming, because I think there's going to be confusion, and as much education we can provide would be helpful to our drivers who are used to, not stopping there. So
Sure.
I don't know what he would recommend, but if we can look into that.
Mr.
Mayor,
Bischoff, could you help us with that?
Can you do that? Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you both. All right, next item's committee referral agenda. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for approval.
So moved.
Motion from Ms. Smith, second from Mr. White. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is unanimous. We move on to other new business where we have a few items before we get to the mayor's presentation. 270819, request to set a public hearing for consideration of a variance to the fence ordinance at 201 Woodland Drive, requested by Terry Johnson, Greg Cobb, and our BEZ folks. We're going to set that for September 9th at 6 p.m., that public hearing. All right, next is 280819, request for consideration of a resolution to adopt transportation plan pursuant to the Rebuild Alabama Act, requested by Berkeley Squires, Melody Salter, and Robert Burgett. There might be a need for a little explanation on that, Mr. Burgett?
We do that.
All right, let Mr. Kendrick do it.
Under
Thank
the
you.
new gas tax passed by the last legislative session, it requires the money that we obtained from that, which is approximately $110,000, to be used for paving primarily only. And they also require you to post a transportation plan annually by August 31 of each year. And so we have a list attached as Exhibit A, which is the paving projects that Berkeley has submitted he proposed to make in the next fiscal year. So this is just in compliance with the new gas tax ordinance.
All right, any questions of Mr. Kendrick? I think it's pretty self-explanatory. And certainly our budgeting process will reflect dotting the i's and crossing the t's to be able to avail
You can
ourselves.
certainly amend that, but it's just the plan as it presently exists.
No, I understand. Well, we'll certainly tie it up with a resolution. I need a motion and a second for approval.
I move to approve.
All right, motion from Mrs. Smith, second from Mr. White. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That is Resolution 19-132, Mr. Kendrick.
Yes, sir.
All right, 290819, request for consideration of approval of vouchers for a period of August 13th through August 26th, 2019, requested by the city treasurer, Mr. Jones.
Mr. Higginbotham.
Mr. Higginbotham.
Thank you, Mr.
Reviewing those,
Chairman.
so thank you.
Every week, every council meeting week I do this, it's a special time for me, really. It's very
I'm happy
emotional.
to hear that.
Spiritual almost. So I spent some time with the invoices and vouchers yesterday, and I went through them. I did have a question which was answered, so I would move to approve the vouchers for the period of August 13th to the 26th.
You know, I'm not quite sure in 7 years I've heard anyone give such an impassioned speech about vouchers.
We might make your appointment
Permanent.
permanent.
You're doing it so much.
Yeah, I'm hearing other finance committee members
The real key
advocate.
is to bring a hearty steak biscuit with you when you come in. That
With that, we have a motion from Mr. Higginbotham. Would someone please second? I'll second that. Good, Mr. Jones. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Surely not. 19-133. All right, our final item is 300819, presentation of the mayor's fiscal year 2019-2020 proposed budgets for general capital, debt service, and special revenue needs. Mayor, the podium is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can't believe y'all stayed. So I got to tell you, about 10 minutes till 6, my mom sends me this text and says, praying that the budget passes tonight. I'm sure it will.
Amen.
Move to approve.
I prayed the same thing.
So I said, Mama, I just present it tonight. Then it goes to finance for discussion, and then back to the full council for a vote. And she said, oh, they should just go ahead and do it tonight. So we'll be accepting unanimous consent. Oh, mercy.
Oh, goodness.
Mamas love you when nobody else does.
That is true.
All right, so another exciting year for the city of Homewood. Let me just kind of go ahead and say some thank yous before I go through the budget. This should take no longer than 45 minutes. No, we'll be quick. We've done.
Some jokes aren't laughed at.
Okay, 50 minutes. But we'll get through this. But I just want to say a huge thank you to Robert, to Melody, to JJ, to all my department heads. It's been a lot of time. This 10,000-foot overview of what we're doing tonight. As quickly as we will go through this tonight, it is in no way states the amount of time that it takes to put something like this together. So I just really appreciate the department heads for being so thoughtful. And I believe tonight we'll give you another really good, honest budget that we can be proud of, and then I'll look forward to working with the finance and full council, Mr. Chairman, as this kind of goes through the process. So, and I am, unless you just have specific questions, kind of the meat of all this will take place in the finance meetings, but we'll just quickly run through this. Unassigned general fund, a little over $13 million. Committed, assigned, and non-spendable in the general fund, almost $26 million. Assigned capital, $5 million. Debt service, $17.5 million. Special revenue growth, restricted, committed, and assigned, 98, almost $99 million, for a total of $161 million. So operating results that I always like to pause, and whether it's here, whether it's my State of the City address, I always like to give you on the council a lot of credit for helping me achieve this. When we start looking at our operating results, this particular model goes back to fiscal year 2014. If you take those surpluses after, and you can see where we've got all the notes on each of the years. So for example, if you take 17, you got 410,000 that we finished with a surplus, but that was after we had the employee bonuses of 350,000 and moved $500,000 to capital. So in that case, you could take the 410 plus another 850, and that would have been the actual surplus for that year. So in this case, since 2014, after we've had the opportunity to bonus our employees, and after we've had a chance to move money over into our capital lines, we're still averaging almost $500,000 surplus every single year. And I don't want to jinx us. I know we're getting really here close to the end, but this year specifically is looking really, really strong. We might finish with just a little north of over $1 million in surplus. So that's going to really help us when it comes time to look at some capital expenses on that. Cash balance on hand, I'm not going to go through all those, but I will point out Reserve for Economic Uncertainty. I believe we started that in 2008 when I became mayor. We didn't have a fund like that. So to now have a little more than 11 million sitting there, I think that really, it should help us all sleep a little better at night. 7-cent gas tax, debt service fund, 17 million in it, capital projects, 5.7. 911, 1.6 million. Then, of course, you got jails, courts, sales tax fund, 7.3 million. Construction fund, now that's a restricted, almost 52 million for that. On down the line, control accounts, judicial inspections, for a total of 113 million. So some of our highlights, and there's really a lot more than this, but this year I have proposed that we provide a 2% COLA to the employees at an approximate cost of $411,142. That also will include merit raises of almost $225,000. And then I'll also be asking, well, not to forget the last part here, the new required pension rates and an estimated 4% increase for our insurance premiums. And then I'll be coming shortly to request bonuses for the employees in the city for us attaining a surplus again. And due to the city reaching its goal on employee wellness screens, the city's received for the best rating of preferred on our health insurance at this time. But it is important that we, and we'll talk more in committee about this, but before the year ends, just because of our retiree census, we want to keep a really close eye on that number, because if we happen to lose that preferred rating, it could mean an additional $300,000 in benefit. So that hasn't happened, but we do need to just keep that on our radar screen. So for the third consecutive year, the budget balances, Mr. Chairman, without needing to utilize a carryover fund balance as a revenue source. It includes a budgeted reserve for any contingency of almost $262,000 if any unanticipated expenditures arise. So our budgeted revenues and budgeted expenses for the upcoming year, $55,196,094. I can't see what the, Brian, is that a, on that screen there? So tell me, is that the,
Sorry, Mayor.
It's okay. So we have total budgeted revenues of $7.3 million. Revenue source carryover fund balance, if you see the $2.9 million, we won't have to use that if you as a council decide to delay any of the funding projects that we're proposing or carried over till fiscal year 2021. But you have total expenditures of $10.3 million, budgeted revenues of $7.3 million. That's where that 2.9 comes in, but we can have some discussion about that as well.
Yeah, that was just that was the capital projects fund.
Capital
It
projects.
just doesn't
That's what I
have
couldn't
the
see at
header
the
on it.
top, so I apologize.
Sorry.
On that. Nope. My fault. Capital project highlights. We're going to continue to our street paving in the city of Homewood. I'm proposing in the amount of $1 million from the Capital Projects Fund and the new Alabama gas tax. Continue funding the Greenway. 2, construction, engineering and construction for the 18th Street project. We'll be completing the new public safety center, which is another $22.5 million. Continued construction of additional sidewalks, purchasing a new fire engine at the cost of about $800,000. And then other departments, we've got some clamshells, we've got Tahoes, we've got a lot of things in there that we need to stay on top. And I've met with the department heads, and I'm comfortable with what we'll be submitting is what they need. Well, it's what they need. They asked for a lot more, but I think they'll be happy if we can get this passed. So our budget summary, there's all our funds. Again, I'm not going to take the time to just read through all of those, but for the exception of the Board of Education and the general obligation warrants, construction funds, $87.6 million. Construction fund, 1920 budget, $41.9 million. This was not included in the totals of the previous slide because this represents carryover construction in process expenditures to complete the new Public Safety Center and the Board of Education infrastructure improvements through the use of remaining bond proceeds for the projects. Doesn't represent new revenues or approved expenditures. And then, of course, the West Homewood Park and Pool project is complete, and it was built from those funds. And our last slide, to talk about our school system continues to thrive, and I know we've always been very supportive of what they're doing, and as far as education is concerned, Fund 6, Board of Education property tax, $9.2 million. Projecting that our sales tax out of the general fund for the Board of Education this upcoming year, $8.7 million, so total contribution to our school system almost $18 million. And I don't think there's a city around that even comes close to that. So we've been blessed. We will, I guess Melody and Robert will, they've got copies. If they haven't already given them to you, we'll get copies of the entire budget out to you before you go. And I appreciate the time. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate this. Mayor, do you have any other subjects you want to cover tonight? Okay, thank you. Mr. Gwaltney?
Nothing particular, but thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the presentation. Looking forward to working through this with you.
All right, great. Thank you, sir. I will remind y'all that next Monday night is Labor Day, so we will not be having committee meetings. So therefore, we will have afternoon committee meetings on the afternoon of September 9th.
You still going to do five?
Mr.
Given
Thames.
that, Mr. Jones, what are your thoughts on finance?
We probably need 30 minutes at 5 o'clock, or we can go at 4, either one's fine.
Well, I'll probably need about 15 minutes for P&D.
We'll let you start then.
At what time would you like to start?
Probably 4 is what we need.
Well, let's do this. Let's work it backwards. We'll do yours at 5:45.
Yeah. Or no, I think, because he said he needed 30 minutes, so from 5 to 5:30, so
5:30?
Britt could have 5:30 to 5:45.
Sure. That's fine.
Okay.
And then if we need to go sooner on some of the other committees, they can go ahead.
No problem. Thank you, sir.
And I assume you're going to get us a schedule for budgeting. Okay. Yep, Mayor,
Send,
thanks.
send that out tomorrow.
All right, great. Looking forward to working through the budget. I like the numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, am looking forward to our budget discussions in the coming weeks. The only item I wanted to, I guess I'll share for the 12 or 13 people watching us on YouTube later this week, and I'm going to share in some other places, too, and there may be other counselors sharing this same thing. Right now, the tree inventory is going on across the city, and I just really want to encourage residents to allow the people doing the inventory to come onto their property. We talk a lot about the importance of trees in our community and wanting to preserve the tree canopy, but if we want to do those things, we've got to do this research to be able to make good decisions about how we continue the good things and make even better things happen. So just let folks come on your property and look at your trees. It's not that big a deal. And that's all I had to say tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Wolverton.
Mainly just, Unfortunately, the back-to-school bash wasn't entirely rained out, but rain definitely significantly influenced, I think, attendance. But I wanted to thank Berkeley and the Parks Department for going out there. They had edged and put a bunch of time into making sure the park was pristine, and then unfortunately Mother Nature had other thoughts. But thank you to everybody that helped to kind of put that on, and obviously we've had a good string with Back to School Bash and all the neighborhood get-togethers. So hopefully we won't have any more weather events anytime soon. That's really it.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
And enjoy college football.
Are you insinuating Washington? But anyway.
We got a good quarterback.
We understand.
Yep.
Mr. Jones?
I have a couple of things tonight. Finance at 5 o'clock. Thank you to Robert and Melody and the mayor and JJ, everybody that helped put the budget together. I appreciate all the work and the department heads, and I see the library is represented tonight. So thank you for all of that. I'll send out proposed dates for the meetings, and then we can determine if those work. It's going to be similar to previous years. And I have an issue that I'm trying to work through, and I have pretty much given up getting it accomplished without asking for your help. And I've already brought it up to Mr. Kendrick. I have several residents on the Old Oxmoor Road, which is at the backside of Palisades. And the dumpster from 3 different restaurants, and each restaurant, Taco Bell, Popeyes, and Guthrie's, uses a different company for their dumpster pickup. But for the past 6 months, they have been picking up at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 4:30, 4:45. I get a text every time they pick up. And the residents over there are just fit to be tied. So Ms. Salter helped me coordinate a meeting with Counselor Abbott. She was very helpful. She shared with me their ordinance states clearly that if you're within certain amount of space from a residential area, they cannot pick up before 7 a.m. That was a couple months ago, and we're not making any progress. I've called the mayor's office within the city of Birmingham, and we're not getting anywhere there. So I'm just asking if anyone has any suggestions, if you can, I know this is a small issue to some people, but if you're right there and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and and these dumpsters are incredibly loud, I don't know what else to do because it's not in the city of Homewood. That's where I'm struggling with this issue, and over all the years, I've never had an issue where I hadn't been able to find a solution.
Walter, has the Birmingham legal, have you talked to Mike's got relationships with some of the attorneys in the Birmingham city office.
Well, the president of the council will certainly have influence in the legal department.
Yeah, I was thinking the president of the council would be a great place to start, and she represents that area also, but I'm just not getting anything, and I have the contact names from each of the companies, but if you have ideas, please, if you can share them with me, and we can, I just need help. I have not been able to solve the issue. So thank you for allowing me to share that. Okay. I'll be happy to. So on that happy note, I'm looking forward to the budget.
Ms. Smith?
I'm going to set special issues for 4:45. I'm going to try to get it done in 15 minutes. It's going to be really fun. And then I'd like to say, so yesterday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, I made a call to the Homewood Police Department dispatch for something that seemed suspicious but not necessarily serious. And the situation escalated pretty quickly and ended up with a police chase that some of you might have seen or heard of. And I just wanted to say that, first of all, our Homewood police officers, men, women, dispatch, everybody, it really made it very clear to me how dangerous their jobs are, because you never know what you're going to run into when you come on a call. Because what seemed like a completely innocuous situation, albeit strange, turned into a dangerous high-speed police chase. And so, first of all, the fact that they give up their own sense of safety to protect ours is amazing to me. And the dispatcher and the shift commander and the officer who came on the scene, who probably had no idea that that's how his day was going to end, all of them, they were so professional, and they made me feel so calm because I'm on the phone trying to be calm and explain what's happening, and, you know, it was going downhill quickly. So first of all, thank you to our police department. They're amazing. It's amazing. It is my 24th anniversary tonight, so I'm hoping we'll be done soon so I can go. And that's it. Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
And that's it.
And I was going to say happy anniversary, even if you didn't just say that.
You are now.
Sure, it looks like it now, but.
Mr. White?
So I'll set public safety for Mr. McCluskey for 5:45. It shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. Thank you to the mayor and to Melody and Robert and everyone else for the budget, but especially those three. We appreciate all the work that you put into it and look forward to working through it. And then lastly, thank you to everyone, first of all, for your kind words about the Sanford agreement and my work on it tonight. But also just for your willingness to work through that process and to be supportive of it and to, work through what was best for our city. And I also appreciate everything Sanford did and the residents who all came out and gave us their ideas. And I really do think we came up with something that's good for the city and good for Sanford both. And I appreciate everyone who worked on that and everyone on the council, because it certainly was a team effort. So thank you.
All right. Ms. Andrus?
And I think we've also had a birthday. Chief Bresnan just had a birthday. I think President Limbaugh just had a birthday, right?
I did.
And Ms. Smith, Councilor Smith, with her anniversary. So happy greetings all the way around. I want to thank Berkeley and Alan Ash, the mayor, and JJ for being with me and Peter on Thursday. Was it Thursday or Friday? We had a meeting with Spire. As you all know, Ward 5 has been dealing with road issues. Yes, it's been it's been rough, but really had a great meeting. I think we had a great productive meeting. We've still got up until about October the 1st. Well, they'll still be working on those lines. It's their goal, and then they'll still be restoring them until maybe the end of November. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I did want to announce that I sent this email out, and like Mike said, for the 10 people who may be watching that didn't see it, that Spire will start tonight at Ventura and 31 and work overnight for the next week and a half between Ventura and 31. So that's going to be night work from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. for the next week and a half. But also, again, to reiterate Mike's point about the tree inventory, it was really fun Saturday to drive up on 3 of Ward 5 residents. Mary Hindley, Katie Tipton, and Carla Suto were out taking inventory, so that was really fun. I grabbed a quick picture of that and wanted to, and agree that they had some folks that haven't responded to their request to get on their property. So I second what Mr. Higginbotham says. And also I want to thank the library for just a banging time a week ago. I mean, it was just crazy. There were so many people there. My sons and I volunteered in the little kids' room, and it was crazy. But it was really, I hope it was a hugely successful fundraiser. It certainly looked like it. So great, well done. So,
Mr. Wright, does Public Works have anything?
Yes, we will have something, and I guess we'll
4:30?
just go, 4:30?
Well, I mean, we've got every slot taken between.
How many?
15.
do we have
And
council?
4:30 it
Do we have
is.
council here?
Just want to make sure I can be there.
Yeah, trust me, you're going to be there.
Okay. That's fine.
Wait a minute.
That's fine.
Wait a
Yeah,
minute.
that's fine.
Time out.
Yeah.
Y'all are adjusting my calendar. Hold on just a second.
So what did we
Mr.
change?
So we do public.
Let's start over. Mr. President, we would like to propose a potential change or swap of the times, Mr. President.
So what are you proposing, Mr. Wright?
Switching public safety to 4:30, since Patrick's not here to defend himself, and moving me, Public Works, not me literally, but Public Works, to 5:15.
5:45.
I misspoke, 5:45.
Okay, And I can draw a W over the S, so it works really well.
And that will be right before council meeting on the 9th, and you will not be there, correct?
Also,
I will
also my
be
birthday,
at
by the way,
Toyota's
everybody.
National Dealer
My birthday.
meeting.
I didn't ask what far remote, exotic
This is not
vacation.
exotic. This is a work meeting.
Okay.
Oh, you're not there?
You work hard at that work meeting.
I do.
Okay. I do plan to be here, so
Thank you
we'll work.
so much, sir.
So we have public
all right.
safety at 4:30 now and public works at 5:45.
5:45.
Okay.
Correct.
Yes, we can handle that.
Yes.
Thank you. What else do you have?
24 years is a long time.
It is, I agree.
Congratulations, Mrs.
Absolutely.
Smith. Alex, thank you again. I remember when we dealt with that 7 years ago, and it was just as much fun. And now, or it really was 8 years ago now, because it went on for another year. And now we get to wait for another 9 years. But importantly, I think it's a hard thing of a college community and a town working together, and there are far too many that do not accomplish
Absolutely.
what was accomplished with Alex's help, and frankly with our city's help, and 7 years ago or 8 years ago and now. So let's just hope that it sets a good precedence for a continued 9 years. And lastly, I do not want to hesitate to comment on, Mayor, thank you for the budget, and thank you for caring so much about that budget. It helps, it shows, it is so important for our city, and I'm just sitting here thinking about, you mentioned the process, and the process that we have now instilled in the city that hasn't always been the case is really something to be envied, I believe, from our finance committee, spending 2 hours, in spiritual time reviewing those accounting records to having a budget committee that is going to go through every line item of the budget to approve, to a mayor who put so much time and effort along with Melody and Robert. It's just a good process to help ensure that the financial strength of our city continues. So I just don't take it for granted. I just want to thank you for that, and we need to do that at least once a year. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. President.
No problem. 2 quick brags. Mr. Mayor, thank you. But we both know that the ones that have worked so diligently are Mr. Burgett and Ms. Salter in particular, and JJ, some efforts there too. So we appreciate all 3 of y'all. Number 1. Number 2, I heard nothing but great things, Ms. Fouts, about the event that Ms. Andrews just alluded to, and I know our newest library board member, Mr. Copeland, spent a lot of time on this, and so I know others did as well, but we just call out the ones that I happen to know, and with that. And no one died from the heat.
That you know about.
Yes. Yes, and construction's going now, full bore, and we're very pleased with that as well. So with that, thank you all. We'll be adjourned.